Hi, I'm Steve James, and on this weekend's 30 Minutes, we take you back 44 years to 1981 when legendary Indiana Hoosiers basketball coach Bob Knight spoke at an event at UT Martin. Coach Knight and former UT Martin athletics director Ray Mears were friends, and Coach Knight made an appearance to help boost ticket sales for the then UT Martin Pacers basketball teams. Coach Bob Knight led the Hoosiers for 29 years, winning 662 games, including 3 national titles in 1976, 1981, and 1987. After leaving Indiana, Knight coached the Texas Tech Red Raiders from 2001 to 2008, where he won his 900th game. Coach Knight finished his career with 902 wins. He was inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame in 1991 and the College Basketball Hall of Fame in 2006. Coach Bob Knight passed away in November 2023 at the age of 83. From 1981, this is Coach Bob Knight at UT Martin on this weekend's 30 Minutes.
It's interesting having an opportunity to coach in a situation where I have 17,600 assistant coaches. Now, you're having a hell of a ticket drive here, Art, and what you're going to do is increase your staff from 4,000 to 6,000 if these people do the job selling tickets. We in 1976 were going through a 2-year period where we had been ranked number 1 in the country for most of those 2 years. In 1976 we were undefeated. We had just played our 25th game against Wisconsin, a game at home on a Saturday afternoon where we had won by 11 points, our 25th consecutive win. I came into the office on Monday morning, and there was a registered special delivery letter waiting for me. I picked it up and looked at the letterhead, and it came from an attorney in northern Indiana. We got any attorneys in here tonight? Oh, come on, you can admit it after Watergate. You don't have to. You know, my dad, great man, the most honest man that I've ever met in my life. You know, hard worker, worked on the railroad for 45 years. Great, honest guy, could never understand why you had to go to college to be a coach. No, he's like our fans. He thought everybody could coach, and he just couldn't understand that. Nobody in my dad's family had gone to college, and they finally had a kid that went to college. He was going to be a coach, and my dad just never could. The day my dad died, he couldn't understand why you had to go to college to be a coach. He wanted me to be a lawyer. And I could never understand why the hell anyone as honest as my dad wanted to have a son that was a lawyer. There's always a little confusion in our relationship. And I got this letter from the attorney in northern Indiana. Remember the circumstances. We just won our 25th game by 11 points against Wisconsin, a little better than average team. 3 pages of single-spaced, typewritten, telling me in detail what we were doing wrong with the team, who we should be playing, why we shouldn't be playing some people, what we had to do to change if we were ever going to make a success of things at Indiana. So I don't usually answer those letters. In fact, I have a little gimmick. My secretary reads all my mail, and she just takes all the complaints and so forth and throws them away. And I answer everything else. And invariably, when I go to something at Indiana, a guy will come up to me and say, "Hey, Coach, did you get my letter?" And I always say, "Well, you know, my secretary reads all my mail." That's caused me 1 or 2 problems. But she reads all my mail. And she passes everything worthwhile on to me, and everything that she thinks is garbage she just throws away. And I answer what she gives me. And I have yet to have a guy that asked me if I got his letter tell me that he didn't get a reply. Every guy says, "Well, you answered my letter. I just wasn't sure whether you did it personally or not. That's why I wanted to ask you." Well, back to my lawyer. So I take his letter, and As I say, I don't usually answer these, but Mary Ann was out that day. I took the letter and I read it, and I decided, boy, I'm going to get a good answer to this. And I have long felt that time is the most important commodity we have. We can use it effectively, efficiently, or we can waste it. And most of us choose the latter course. I think very few people have learned how to handle time. It's something that I believe you constantly strive to defeat. Time has the greatest record against mankind of anything. So it took me an hour to formulate this clever reply that went something like this. Dear so-and-so, thank you for your letter concerning the fortunes and direction of our basketball team. However, at this point, I would be remiss not to tell you that when I first started coaching, I decided that if a man with the foresight, the intelligence, the character of Abraham Lincoln couldn't please all the people all the time, then I certainly couldn't either. Sincerely yours. I thought that was a great reply to this idiotic letter. Really shut him up. About 2 days later, I get another special delivery registered letter. Same letterhead, same attorney. Instead of shutting the guy up, I'd gotten a pen pal. I open up the envelope, read the letter. Dear Coach, thank you for taking the time to reply to my letter. However, I too would be remiss if at this point I failed to let you know that I did not like Lincoln worth a damn either. So many things happen to you in basketball. Some people that have a little cursory knowledge of Indiana, a little knowledge of Indiana from afar, might be surprised when I tell you that I read the Bible. A lot of interesting things in the Bible. The Bible tells us about a lot of things. 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 19 tells us about referees. For you suffer fools gladly. The book of Job, chapter 35, verse 16, tells us about sports writers. He multiplieth words without knowledge. And in the book of Psalms, we can find how to deal with alumni. All things have their place. Knew we how to place them. Decision making in everyday life, in athletics, I think is the most important process that any one of us undergoes. I think the ability to say no, the ability to use the word no, can perhaps be the most important asset that a person can have. It's a hell of a lot easier to say yes after saying no than it is to say no after saying yes. Being decisive, I think, is of utmost importance in athletics. You players, all of you that are here, are going to have to be decisive, active athletes in order to be successful. He who hesitates is lost. A long time ago, a friend of mine gave me a letter from Harry Truman to his brother. The letter goes like this. The things go up and down. One day you do things you think are for the welfare of the country, and the next you are up against a complete reversal of feeling because something else that is right doesn't please. I think the proper thing to do, and that which I have been doing, is to do what I think is right and let them all go to hell. Now, let me convert that to an athlete's thinking for just a moment. You're going to be confronted with all kinds of choices and challenges, both on the basketball floor and off. There is always a right choice, a correct option, and unfortunately, it usually isn't the easiest route to take. If you want success as an athlete, and if as an athlete you want to be part of a successful operation, then think about the word no. Let me encourage you to include at the top of your vocabulary the word no. The word no when you are certain that it is the right answer. The word no when you aren't certain gives you an opportunity to reflect upon what is right and what is wrong. We're lucky that we're in a country where we can make these kinds of choices and have these decisions to make. I heard a couple of years ago the great black country western singer Charlie Pride on a stage in Dayton, Ohio, talk about being a sharecropper's son on a farm down in the Mississippi Delta, down in the state of Mississippi, where as a young boy, his only thought during the week, his biggest thrill during the week was going into town, riding in on a wagon on Saturday night, having a dime to spend any way he wanted. Have you guys ever seen a dime? I mean, there aren't many anymore, and they sure as hell don't buy anything you want. Charlie Pride having a dime to spend anything he wanted. And he told this audience of several thousand people in Dayton, Ohio, that the previous year he had gone back down to Mississippi and bought that farm where he grew up as a sharecropper's son. And that, Charlie Pride said, is what can be accomplished in this country and nowhere else. That's what we have an opportunity to do here. I've had, as I mentioned, some very interesting experiences with the game of basketball. Basketball, I think, maybe above anything else, has taught me, it's taught a lot of us, something about winning. And I think before you can ever win, you have to eliminate losing. And in every profession, there are ways to lose. You lose because of sloppy appearance. You lose because of poor enunciation or poor diction. You lose because of not being prepared, not being organized. You lose because you take poor shots, or you don't block out, or you handle the ball poorly. Anytime that you're going to win at anything, I believe you have got to eliminate losing. We talk about the will to win. We hear this from everybody. Broadcasters, writers, athletes, coaches, the will to win. I contend that everybody has a will to win. When the ball's thrown up to start the game, everybody wants to win. Far more important to me than the will to win is the will to prepare to win. Most games, most athletic contests of a team nature are going to go to those people who have best prepared to win. I told him this before, and I say this in front of him tonight. I doubt that in his entire career as a coach that Ray Mears could go back and find 5 coaches that he coached against that worked as hard to prepare a team to play as he did. And therein, I think, more than anything else, lies the success to his greatness as a coach. The will to prepare to win. I had a roommate in college that after graduating from Ohio State decided that he was going to tour the world and see what went on everywhere in this world of ours. Take a job here and a job there and a job somewhere else for 2 years. and then come back and either go to graduate school or settle down and get a job. But one of the first things that he did was get a job in South Africa as a guide in a hunting safari company. And when I next talked to him after this experience, he recounted his first trip to me. As a rookie guide, he's bringing up the rear of the pack train, tired, thirsty. They're about to set camp. He's a little bit careless. He's been dragging behind the people in front of him just a little bit. First time out in the bush country. Got a rifle rather carelessly slung over his back and turns a little corner in the trail, and there sitting on top of a rock, crouched to spring, is a full-grown male lion. And as he sees my friend, he jumps, leaps at my friend. My friend just happens to stumble at that moment, falls to the side, the lion goes over top of him, and by the time that my friend can get turned around, bring his rifle to his shoulder, the lion is off in the bush country. And he's extremely shaken by this experience. Not only because he almost lost his own life, but since that didn't happen, he's thinking, my gosh, what if I'm in charge of protecting somebody? And I'm no more ready, I'm no more prepared than I was in this particular instance. It'd be tragic. So that night, after helping set up the camp, forsaking supper, he stuffed his bush jacket full of rifle shells. He went out a half a mile or so away from the camp, and he was practicing snap shots. Shoot at a little bush, shoot at a rock from different positions, testing his reflexes, his marksmanship. Rounded a little clump of trees, and there, among a group of rocks, was the same lion, practicing shorter jumps. The will to prepare to win. And then when things are going pretty good for us, one of the great things about basketball is that the game always has a way of kind of bringing you back down to earth. In 1976, we had won the NCAA championship in Philadelphia, defeating Michigan from our conference in the final game, and our players received a lot of awards. Going on into the summer in August, we had two of our kids playing on the U.S. Olympic team, Quinn Buckner, the captain and a starting guard, and Scott May, a starting forward. And I was relaxing in my living room, about to watch the game between the United States and the Yugoslavian national team for the Olympic championship in 1976, knowing that this was going to be a great night for Indiana basketball. Buckner, May, two great players, our players. The analyst for the game was Bill Russell, who had played with John Havlicek, a teammate of mine at Ohio State, a guy that I knew fairly well. And the announcer was a very close friend of mine, Kurt Gowdy, still a very close friend of mine. And I thought, boy, all the ingredients are there. This is going to be a great night for publicity for Indiana basketball. And all of us in coaching think about things that might help us in recruiting. And this certainly could do us no harm. Game starts, and in the very first minute of play, May executes an awfully sharp, quick cut to get open on a back cut, move to the bucket. Buckner makes a semi-blind pass that's right on the money. Scott lays it in and he's fouled. And Bill Russell on the instant replay talks about tremendous execution between Buckner and May, a result of their having played together and the outstanding coaching they'd received in college. And I knew that my good buddy Kurt Gowdy is going to jump all over that statement. And before Russell's voice has died from the TV screen, Kurt jumps in and says, "Bill, you're absolutely right about the coaching at Indiana, and no one does a better job than my great friend Bob Young." There isn't anything that can take us to a height quicker or drop us with a more resounding thud than athletics. That's why athletics are just so great. President Kennedy once said when addressing a group of athletes at the White House, "We must expect you athletes, because of your outstanding successes and your occasional failures, to rise above and beyond those timid souls who have never dared compete and therefore have not learned to distinguish the bitterness of defeat from the sweetness of victory." And there is one hell of a difference between winning and losing. And the biggest difference is in preparation. The last game, next game theory is something that I like to talk about anytime I get a chance to do so. Your success in athletics, your success in selling tickets, is predicated on the next game, last game idea. How many times have you read, perhaps about your favorite team or about a team that you follow, particularly in football or basketball, that has an awfully good day, wins an important game, only to turn around and lose its next game? Forgetting the last game, particularly a winning game, and going on to the next game is incredibly important. I'd like to see somebody sell somewhere more than 45 tickets, because I know the kind of competitor Dick Davies is, and if somebody else sells 45 tickets to a company, a group, or a corporation, Dick's going to buy 25 more just to stay on top. The next game, last game. We won on Thursday, but it doesn't have much bearing on Saturday's game. Those of us that stay with some success made yesterday, a line from a quote in a book by John Wooden, are going to have a hell of a lot of problems tomorrow. Now, John didn't say that. But I think that the ability to be successful in athletics is more than anything else predicated on these 2 points: the will to prepare to win and getting to the next game from the last game, thinking about the next game, not thinking about the last game. I told the coach that I would be glad to talk about some things that I thought were important in athletics, some experiences that I've had in basketball, and also take a few minutes toward the end to throw it open to you people to see if there are any questions that you would like to ask me. I'm sure if we still have some members of the news media in attendance, there are those of you who can really ask some questions from which they will be able to write some pretty good stories, not being particularly adept at asking questions on their own. How are we doing from a public relations standpoint with the press tonight? Does anybody, in fact, have a question that you would like to ask about basketball or about college athletics that I might be able to answer for you? Any questions?
Do you think the ACC rates or competes at all with Big Ten basketball not being present
I think this past year the Atlantic Coast Conference was better than the Big Ten. I think that historically, if you're going to use almost any criterion imaginable, number of teams going to the Final Four, number of teams winning the NCAA championship, number of players drafted in the first round, the Big Ten has been the best conference in college basketball. But I think there are individual years when other conferences have been better. And I think the two that probably would have been better more often are the Atlantic Coast Conference and the Southeastern Conference. And I'll tell you something about Southeastern Conference basketball that I think is overlooked a lot, and I think there are some people, particularly in basketball, that understand this. Rupp obviously did a lot for basketball. He was one of a kind, a great charismatic figure, but Rupp didn't do for basketball in the South nearly what this guy did, because he beat Rupp. When he came to Tennessee and started beating Rupp on a fairly regular basis, everybody else in the South decided that they too could do something with basketball. And I don't think anybody is more responsible for the development of basketball, the oncoming of the Alabamas, the Vanderbilts, and the Louisiana States and so forth, than Ray Mears was, because he showed everybody else that you could make a hell of a lot of money out of basketball. You could be very competitive, and pretty soon the Southeastern Conference grew from, I think, what was an also-ran conference at best when he went into it, to one of the strongest 3 or 4 conferences in the country. The thing that I think is many times overlooked. In my mind, Rupp was not in any way responsible for this.
Do you think the Big Ten will ever use the postseason?
No. No. Got to learn to use that word. No.
Do you have any memories of Coach Mears when he was trying to recruit you out of high school?
Oh, I can remember the very first time I met him. I was shooting baskets at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio, and he was attending summer school, completing work on a master's degree there, and he was in his last summer, and I was going into my junior year in high school. And he came in and introduced himself to me, and then subsequently brought a scrapbook of Wittenberg basketball to me and allowed me to take it home and look through it for several days, and then I in turn brought it back to him. I used to go back and forth to Kent with a friend of mine and a couple of girls that were going to summer school, and I'd, whenever I could, get loose and ride up with them, play ball in the morning, then come home with them in the afternoon. And I think that was the start of a pretty good friendship between the two of us. I never had the opportunity to play for him. I played for a great college coach in Fred Taylor. Yet Coach Mears and I, while he was continuing to coach at Wittenberg and when he went on to Tennessee, maintained that relationship that we started when I was a sophomore in high school and he was completing his graduate work at Kent. He was just a guy that you met and could easily think that this is the kind of guy you'd like to play for. And I think when I first met him, the thing that struck me most was just how interested he was in the game of basketball. Wasn't interested in Ray Mears and was more interested in basketball than Wittenberg, and seemed to like basketball a lot better than who he would recruit. And it's always been those people that just enjoy basketball that I've been attracted to.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio. You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.